The onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic has forever changed life as we know it. With over 100 million positive cases worldwide and counting, the global medical, pharmaceutical, and scientific communities have been engaged in an unprecedented race against time, achieving truly remarkable breakthroughs in vaccine research, development, and testing to secure regulatory approvals and roll out mass immunization programs in record time. However, the challenge has only just begun. The mass distribution of COVID vaccines to the global population presents what is without doubt the largest and most complex logistical operation ever to be undertaken in human history. It will require the continued cooperation, collaboration, and mobilization of manpower, assets, and infrastructure networks across all industries and geographies worldwide. Today, Abu Dhabi unites thought leaders from around the world in open dialogue around the logistical challenges of vaccine mobilization, from production to patient, with the aim of finding scalable, real-world solutions to achieve mass, equitable worldwide distribution at this critical juncture facing the health, well-being, and prosperity of all mankind. Today, we begin the next phase of the collective human effort in the fight against COVID-19. Together, we can overcome any obstacle because even in the darkest hours, hope will prevail.
Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. Good morning from Abu Dhabi, and thank you for joining us virtually for the inaugural World Immunization and Logistics Summit. My name is Yousef Abdelbary, and it gives me great pleasure to be your MC over the next 2 days. 2 very promising days. But now, let us rewind the clocks a little bit more than a year, in December 2019 in particular, where the first human cases of COVID-19 were reported by officials in Wuhan, China. And as the new year dawned on January 1st, 2020, little did the world know just how drastically life would soon change for all of us. By January, the novel coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, was identified and its genetic sequence shared publicly with medical researchers and scientists across the globe. Without most of us even being aware, the race to find a vaccine to protect against COVID-19 had already begun. Over the course of the past year, the world has faced previously unimaginable levels of adversity. COVID-19 has created one of the greatest public health crises in modern history, with over 124 million positive cases reported since December 2019. And it has closed offices and schools, grounded planes, and crippled industries and economies worldwide. Families and friends torn apart, and global lockdown on a truly unprecedented scale. But even in the face of this great adversity, human kindness, strength, and perseverance shone through. Heroes have emerged in our hospitals and clinics, in research labs, in ports and airports, in grocery stores, and in delivery vans. Leaders have stepped up and helped us to see light when many felt alone and afraid. The world has come together like never before. Through active collaboration and cooperation, we have navigated this new reality. The medical and scientific community has worked at a remarkable pace to develop vaccines to help protect us against COVID-19. And today, we face the next phase of this challenge: the timely, safe, secure, and efficient mass distribution of vaccines worldwide. If we have learned anything over the course of the past year, it is that together we can achieve the impossible. The World Immunization and Logistics Summit, under the patronage of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the United Arab Emirates, and hosted by the Hope Consortium of Abu Dhabi, is proud to welcome industry and thought leaders from around the world here today, uniting those spearheading the charge in this collective human effort to combat the COVID-19 pandemic in open dialogue around the logistical challenges of vaccine mobilization. Thank you for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that by bringing this diverse group together, we can achieve even greater levels of innovation and collaboration as we work together to halt this pandemic. To begin, it is our privilege to invite to the stage His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Minister of International Affairs and International Cooperation, to deliver his opening speech. Please welcome him.
أصحاب المعالي، أصحاب السعادة، شرفني أن أحدثكم عن الدور الذي تلعبه دولة الإمارات في الجهود العالمية لمواجهة جائحة كوفيد-19. لكني أود أولاً أن أشكر شركائنا في ائتلاف الأمل على استضافة القمة العالمية للتحصين والخدمات اللوجستية لعام 2021. يعمل ائتلاف الأمل من خلال جمع أكثر من 1000 من صانعي السياسات وخبراء الصحة العالميين والجهات وأصحاب الشأن من القطاعين العام والخاص على توسيع نطاق الحصول على اللقاحات بشكل عادل والحفاظ على سلاسل الإمداد الحيوية ووضع حلول حقيقية للتحديات اللوجستية التي يجب علينا التغلب عليها في سعينا للعودة للوضع الطبيعي. بعد مرور أكثر من عام على انتشار الجائحة، كمجتمع دولي أصبحنا متأكدين من أن ازدهار الدول يكون بمضافرة الجهود والتعاون مع الدول الأخرى. فقد بات عالمنا مترابط بشكل وثيق، وبات مصيرنا كدول مرتبطة ببعضنا البعض، حيث يعتمد الأمن الصحي العالمي على رفاه جميع المجتمعات. وقد لعبت دولة الإمارات باعتبارها مركز لوجستي رائد عالمي دور محوري في ضمان تزويد الدول بالموارد التي تحتاجها للخروج من هذه الأزمة، حيث تحركت بسرعة لتقديم المساعدات الطبية والغذائية في جميع أنحاء العالم، وذلك بفضل بنيتها التحتية العالمية وقدرتها اللوجستية وقربها الجغرافي من أفريقيا وآسيا وأوروبا. وقد بذلت دولة الإمارات جهود كبيرة للحد من انتشار الجائحة عالمياً من خلال تقديم أكثر من 1760 طن من المساعدات إلى 129 دولة. وفي 26 نوفمبر 2020 رفعت دولة الإمارات التزاماتها، وذلك عبر الإعلان التاريخي عن إطلاق ائتلاف الأمل من أبو ظبي، حيث حشد ائتلاف الأمل خبراته لتوفير أكثر من 6 مليارات جرعة من اللقاح في العام 2021، وضمان حصول الدول في 170 دولة على هذه الخدمات. كلما أسرع شركائنا في تطعيم سكانهم، كلما أسرعنا جميعا في التطلع والتعافي الشامل. إننا في الإمارات نعتقد أن كل شخص له الحق في الحصول على اللقاح دون تمييز. منذ بداية أزمة كوفيد-19 تحركت بلادي بسرعة لضمان حصول جميع الأفراد من مواطنين ومقيمين على الفحص والعلاج. وتفخر دولة الإمارات باستضافة أولى تجارب المرحلة الثالثة السريرية للقاح سينوفارم. كما تعتبر دولة الإمارات من الدول المتصدرة في حملات التلقيح في العالم، حيث تم إعطاء أكثر من 7.5 مليون جرعة من اللقاح. تؤمن دولة الإمارات بأن التضامن هو من أعظم القيم الراسخة. منذ تأسيس دولتنا قبل 50 عام كانت بمثابة منارة للانفتاح والتعاون. لم تعمل تحديات العام الماضي إلا على تعزيز هذا الالتزام، وقد دعمت مبادرة كوفيكس التي تهدف إلى ضمان الوصول العادل إلى اللقاحات المضادة للفيروس كوفيد-19 من خلال الشراكة مع اليونيسف لتخزين اللقاحات في المدينة العالمية للخدمات الإنسانية في دبي. كما انضمت دولة الإمارات إلى مرفق أصدقاء كوفيكس لدعم تعددية اللقاح والجهود التي تهدف إلى تأمين وصوله إلى الجميع بطرق عادلة ومنصفة وضمن تكاليف ميسرة. من خلال ائتلاف الأمل والتحالف اللوجستي الذي أعلنته مدينة دبي، ستواصل دولة الإمارات لعب دور رائد في المساعدات على تسريع وتيرة إنهاء أزمة كوفيد من خلال التلقيح العالمي. آمل في أن تؤدي مناقشاتكم هنا إلى تعزيز الجهود الرامية إلى وضع الحلول للتحديات التي تواجهنا جميعا. اليوم لا نزال نشعر بامتنان عميق لمشاركتكم وشراكتكم معنا. سوف نضمن مستقبل أكثر صحة للجميع.
Thank you, Your Highness. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to welcome to the stage the Chairman of the Abu Dhabi Department of Economic Development and Honorary Chairman of the Hope Consortium. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming His Excellency, Mr. Mohamed Ali Shorafa Al-Hammadi. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Hope Consortium, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all virtually to Abu Dhabi for the first World Immunization and Logistics Summit. We will be discussing the collaboration, cooperation, and optimization of global vaccine distribution. This mission is pivotal to the eradication of COVID-19. Throughout the past year, the world has faced a truly unprecedented chapter in human history. The COVID-19 pandemic swept across the globe with devastating consequences. Over 2 million human lives have been lost, with countless livelihoods impacted and causing significant economic damage that's likely to endure for years to come. However, even as some semblance of normalcy is being restored, we are now facing the next phase in the fight against COVID-19, which is perhaps the greatest global logistical challenge in recent human history. Esteemed guests, the UAE's leadership and government are harnessing their utmost capabilities and potential in the service of humanity as we meet today to promote our strategic partnership through the Hope Consortium to work together to quickly and equitably distribute billions of vaccines doses globally by the end of 2021. In order to help achieve this, Abu Dhabi government has built an effective partnership framework for the Hope Consortium that includes the Department of Health Abu Dhabi, Ittihad Cargo, Abu Dhabi Ports, Rafid, Maqta Gateway, and SkyCell. Ladies and gentlemen, the establishment of the Hope Consortium in Abu Dhabi reflects the Emirates' significant logistical capabilities. This is supported by the political will of the leadership who have long championed humanitarian efforts around the world. As part of the consortium's collaborative approach to achieving the huge logistical challenge of global vaccine delivery, healthcare procurement company Rafid has partnered with Abu Dhabi Ports to establish UAE's largest cold storage facility, which can store vaccines at temperatures ranging from 8 to -80 degrees, and the facility and distribution center is located in Khalifa Industrial Zone, KZAD, Abu Dhabi's integrated trade logistics and industrial hub, which uses the latest technology and warehouse management solutions to ensure the provision of smooth services and enable the easy supply of medicines and medical equipment through the local, regional, and global supply chains. The Hope Consortium is also deploying the latest technologies to ensure full visibility, safety, and security, and tamper-proof distribution of the COVID-19 vaccines. Abu Dhabi Ports recently announced the launch of Immunity, a custom-built digital system that employs blockchain technology to track and trace COVID-19 vaccine sourcing, storage, shipment, and all related data in real time at every step of the vaccine journey. Your Excellencies, the UAE's logistics sector has shown its resilience over the past year, with globally competitive air and maritime transport capabilities remaining undimmed. Supported by a broad network of tech-enabled warehouses, this has enabled Abu Dhabi to limit the repercussions of the pandemic by maintaining a constant supply of goods through local and regional supply chains, which in turn has alleviated economic and social challenges. We reaffirm our commitment to supporting the Hope Consortium and enabling it to expand its reach and add new international logistic partners in order to serve the global community, and providing hope and vital supplies to every corner of the earth requires a broad global dialogue, which is why the conversations we are having at the World Immunization and Logistics Summits are vitally important. The event serves as an opportunity for the global community to come together to share information and work together to build on our current knowledge to find new, scalable, and sustainable solutions at this critical juncture facing global health, well-being, and prosperity. Once again, I and the organizers of the World Immunization and Logistics Summit would like to thank you for joining us, and we wish you all success in our collective endeavor to combat the pandemic and save lives. We hope that over the next 2 days, you will engage in many fruitful discussions and virtual networking opportunities and build new partnerships that we will help deliver hope around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. Mohamed Ali Shorafa Al Hammadi, Chairman of the Abu Dhabi Department of Economic Development. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is the Director General of the World Health Organization, and he will be talking about coordinating a global response to mitigate the public health and economic impact of the pandemic. Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the floor is yours.
Your Highness, Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah, Excellencies, Ministers, Honorable Delegates, dear colleagues and friends. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The COVID-19 pandemic has been a devastating demonstration that we are one humanity and that we can only face shared threats with shared solutions. Since the beginning of the pandemic, WHO has been working with many partners to scale up the distribution of tests, personal protective equipment, and other essential supplies all over the world. Now, vaccines are giving us hope of bringing the pandemic under control. But we can only do that if we use vaccines strategically to suppress transmission everywhere at the same time. The gap between the number of vaccines administered in rich countries and the number of vaccines administered through COVAX is growing every single day. The inequitable distribution of vaccines is not just a moral outrage. It's also economically and epidemiologically self-defeating. The more transmission, the more variants. And the more variants that emerge, the more likely it is that they will evade vaccines. And as long as the virus continues to circulate anywhere, people will continue to die. Trade and travel will continue to be disrupted, and the economic recovery will be further delayed. WHO is continuing to work day and night to find solutions to increase the production and equitable distribution of vaccines. Vaccinating at this scale and in this time frame has never been done before, and we face significant challenges. We're still seeing bilateral deals that clog up the system and create a chaotic environment. We're continuing to hold discussions with manufacturers and countries at all income levels about how to ramp up production and solve bottlenecks. We continue to explore options for technology transfer, including through the setup mechanism. But ultimately, it's not vaccines that save lives. It is vaccinations. The scale of what's needed in terms of the number of vaccinators, engagement with communities, and ongoing monitoring and health system strengthening is truly unprecedented. WHO welcomes the HOPE Consortium initiative led by the government of UAE, and we look forward to working with you to frame a partnership in support of COVAX facility. We can only meet this challenge together with a coordinated, consistent, and coherent approach. Ultimately, ending the pandemic is not just a test of science, it is a test of character. Shukran jazilan. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. Ladies and gentlemen, the next speaker is the Executive Director at UNICEF, and she will be talking about ensuring equitable access to the COVID-19 vaccines. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite Mrs. Henrietta Fore to the virtual stage.
On behalf of everyone at UNICEF, thank you to UAE's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation and the HOPE Consortium for organizing the summit. This summit is an important opportunity to draw attention to the need for partnerships as we fight COVID-19. With partners like the UAE, the COVAX facility is supporting more than 100 countries to vaccinate their populations and providing critical supplies like testing kits, protective clothing, and food. The only way out of this pandemic is to ensure that every country is vaccinated and that less wealthy countries are not left behind. Through COVAX, UNICEF is proud to be leading the largest vaccine procurement and delivery in history. With our partners Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, WHO, and CEPI, we are working to provide equitable access to up to 2 billion doses of the vaccine by year's end. We have joined forces with manufacturers, airlines, and logistics companies, and with the PAHO Revolving Fund to procure and deliver vaccines for 92 low and lower middle-income countries, and to support the procurement of vaccines for about 97 upper middle-income and high-income nations. In total, this represents more than 4/5 of the world's population. To date, more than 31 million doses have been delivered to 57 countries, including Ghana and Ivory Coast, which became Africa's first COVAX vaccine recipients in February. In addition to the procurement and delivery, UNICEF is also working with countries to prepare them for the rollout. This involves mapping out cold chain equipment and storage capacity. For example, we've delivered thousands of new fridges to keep vaccines at the right temperature in health facilities around the world. But we need help. First, we need vaccine manufacturers to prioritize COVAX and work to secure regulatory approval for fast, fair, and affordable distribution. Second, we need wealthier nations to donate extra doses through COVAX. UNICEF stands ready to channel all donations fairly and equitably where the needs are greatest. And third, we require funding, an urgent investment of US $510 million to support vaccine delivery around the world. The people at this summit can help every country get back to normal faster, because vaccines are not just about COVID-19. They are about hope. Hope for children so they can return to school. Hope for their communities to rebuild all the systems they count on, health and nutrition, water and sanitation. And hope for their countries' economies who need this pandemic to end. The time is now. Let us meet this moment together, and let us make sure that the light at the end of the tunnel truly shines for every country, every community, every family, and every child, no matter who or where they are in the world.
Thank you, Ms. Fore. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is the CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. His talk is titled, "No One is Safe Until Everyone is Safe, Uniting to Vaccinate the World." Mr. Mark Suzman, welcome, and the floor is now yours.
Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to join you today to discuss the urgent issue of immunization and the world's access to life-saving medical products. We are in the midst of a global health and economic crisis. How much longer the crisis will last and how many more people will die depends in large part on what the global community does next. The most important priority is to minimize the loss of life and the economic scarring as soon as possible. And that means working together to deliver vaccines to all countries, not just the richest ones. The global community has never done anything on this scale before. It will be a test of our humanity and our ingenuity. But with leadership from countries like the United Arab Emirates, we can succeed. It is fitting that the UAE has convened this meeting because you have been at the forefront of global development for a long time. In recent years, in fact, you have consistently been the most generous foreign aid donor in the world as a proportion of national income. A little over a year ago, you hosted the pledging moment for the Global Polio Eradication Initiative in Abu Dhabi, demonstrating the leadership role you play in the area of infectious diseases. That is why our foundation is so proud to have co-founded alongside His Highness Sheikh Mohamed bin Zayed the Global Institute for Disease Elimination, or GLIDE, in Abu Dhabi. GLIDE is a new organization, but is already playing an important role in the fight against malaria, polio, neglected diseases, and now COVID-19. Of course, since the pandemic struck, the UAE has continued to play its part. You rightly focused on protecting your own people from the virus, while at the same time seeking ways to help protect people in other countries, because you understand that ending the pandemic means ending the disease everywhere. Along the way, you have provided invaluable assistance of one kind or another to 70 countries. At the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we have also been focused over the past year on how we can help end the pandemic, cushion the impact for the poorest, and build an inclusive recovery. To date, we have allocated $1.75 billion to the COVID-19 response, and we have started thinking in new ways about all aspects of our giving to reflect the impact and lessons of COVID-19. Many of our investments are in tests, treatments, and vaccines, the topic of today's summit. In fact, achieving fair access to vaccines is one of the main reasons why Bill and Melinda Gates started their foundation more than 20 years ago. One of their first big philanthropic projects was to help create Gavi, the organization that works with low-income countries to immunize hundreds of millions of children. The UAE, by the way, is an important donor to Gavi. Now we're partnering with Gavi, UNICEF, the World Health Organization, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, and many others on what is called COVAX, an innovative way to organize a global partnership to make sure that the 92 poorest countries in the world have access to COVID-19 vaccines. We are working hard to make sure that COVAX is fully funded because we believe it is the world's best option for distributing vaccines equitably. A lot of countries are generously considering donating vaccines to others, and that is of course commendable. But our experience working with Gavi over the last 2 decades has shown how much more efficient it is to do this through a truly global mechanism. Since Gavi was founded, the price of vaccines for poor countries has dropped to just a fraction of what it was because of the buying power of a single global procurer. And the efficiency of being able to allocate vaccines based on need, not politics, helped the world increase vaccination rates from just over 60% before Gavi was founded to well over 80% in 2019, before COVID-19 started disrupting routine immunization programs. We owe it to the world to use this tried and tested system to solve the pandemic on a global scale and not piecemeal. I'd like to spend the rest of my remarks describing why distributing vaccines equitably is so critical, not just for low-income countries, but for all countries. There is a strong moral argument, and we will never stop making that argument. A person's right to survive is absolute. It is not determined by her ability to pay. But there are also strong epidemiological and economic arguments for equitable vaccination. As the title of my talk says, no one is safe until everyone is safe. This is not a slogan. With more COVID-19 variants emerging, it is an epidemiological reality. And in a global economy where countries must depend on one another for prosperity, it is an economic fact. We asked the Eurasia Group to model how fully funding the global effort to get tests, treatments, and vaccines fairly distributed would benefit the economy in high-income countries. We asked them to use conservative assumptions so we could be confident as possible in their numbers. And their model estimates that by supporting the 92 least wealthy countries at a total cost of $38 billion, just 10 high-income countries, including the UAE, would generate at least $466 billion for their own economies by 2025. That is a return on investment of 12 times. Other studies have suggested the returns to rich countries from helping the poorest end the pandemic could be even greater, potentially in the trillions. What surprised me was that a relatively small country like the UAE turns out to have the most to gain of almost anyone. Far more, in fact, than the UK, France, Germany, or Japan. That is because the UAE is so open to trade and travel. The price of oil, the success of airlines and tourism, global events, all depend on global demand, including from less wealthy countries. By themselves, initiatives like COVAX seem like they cost a lot of money at a time where money feels scarce. But study after study has shown that COVAX is not just an act of generosity, it is an act of self-preservation too. One reason I'm optimistic that the world will rise up to the challenge of equitable vaccine distribution is that pioneers like the United Arab Emirates are convening summits like this one to think pragmatically about how to do it. At times of crisis, it is easy to see who has the foresight and the strength to take on the toughest problems and lead the world towards equity and prosperity. I look forward to learning more about the outcomes of this summit and following your innovative response to the pandemic in the weeks and months to come. Thank you.
Our thanks are extended to Mr. Mark Suzman, the CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has presented a steep learning curve. Agility, adaptability, and cooperation have been made at the heart of the tremendous progress that has been made to this point. The next keynote panel brings together a cross-section of industry and thought leaders sharing a range of perspectives on the key challenges they have faced so far, the corresponding actions taken, and the learnings made as we face the next critical phase of the fight against COVID-19. We would like to welcome to the stage the following panelists. His Excellency Abdullah bin Mohamed Al-Hamid, Chairman of the Department of Health, Abu Dhabi, and His Excellency Falah Mohamed Al-Ahbabi, Chairman of the Abu Dhabi Ports and Chairman of Abu Dhabi Department of Municipalities and Transport, also known as DMT, Professor Jose Manuel Baruso, Board Chair at Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, Dr. Richard Hatchett, CEO of CEPI, and I'd also like to welcome the moderator of this promising panel, Mrs. Hadley Gamble, anchor at CNBC. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much for that, Yousef, and thank you once again on behalf of myself and CNBC to the HOPE Consortium for gathering us all together for a conversation that no doubt is going to be instrumental in saving lives and making the world, frankly, a better place. Obviously, at CNBC, we're very much numbers and finance and economics focused, and this is a global pandemic that has touched all of our lives and changed our future and the future trajectory of the world and the global economy. Now, even though we've seen numbers in recent days from the IMF and others that are encouraging about a turnaround, perhaps closer than we think in what's happening in the world today, the trajectory of this disease remains very much an uncertainty. We're watching closely concerns in Europe, for example, that we could see a third wave of this pandemic. And there are big questions about whether or not the biggest stimulus in the world, that $1.9 trillion stimulus that President Biden just put through in the United States, is going to really be enough to get this global economy back on track. But I want to kick things off first with the chairman of the Department of Health of Abu Dhabi, His Excellency Abdullah Mohamed. Your Excellency, it's great to have you, and thank you so much for inviting CNBC and myself. My question to you, just to sort of kick us off here, is one that encapsulates what you've managed to do in terms of Abu Dhabi and the UAE's vaccination rollout. You've been an example, frankly, to the world in terms of how to get this done. When you think about that with regards to what happens next, obviously the UAE is halfway to its goal now, more than halfway to its goal of vaccinating residents and citizens. How does that kind of success in terms of the initiative translate, in your view, to the rest of the world?
Thank you very much. Actually, it's not the first pandemic the world had seen, but it is the one that's going to last with us for a very long time. On early days, Abu Dhabi had worked very hard on taking things seriously on the first announcement that we heard from China. And from the first days early on, our government were very engaged on every day-to-day basis. It was very important to have the government to be engaged, as we needed them actually to take some serious actions and fast actions that we want to be ahead of everyone taking these responsive actions. Abu Dhabi actually had worked tirelessly, and we made sure that everyone in Abu Dhabi has a world-class healthcare service access. So we did not stop there only, but we started also having our ramping up in the capacity in testing, manpower, contact tracing, hospital beds, field hospitals. And it's a long list of so many things that we've taken as an action points from early stages. These helped us actually by taking actions in the first days on to overcome and become ahead of what's happening. As everyone knows, that pandemics needs speed and it needs actions on spot, and every minute by minute. So this is how we took things in Abu Dhabi, and that's how we actually managed to have a fast response over the actions we took in the past period.
Professor Barrasso, I want to bring you in on this one, obviously, with a view to what we're seeing in the rest of the world, Europe specifically. Obviously, there are fears about what a third wave could potentially mean for Europe, whether we could see potentially another series of lockdowns across the European countries. In your view, obviously, Abu Dhabi, a major success story in terms of the vaccination rollout. It hasn't been as successful in Europe. How worried are you?
Of course, I'm worried because there are still some doubts about developments of this pandemic. And we have seen different phases, some phases where people were already saying everything is going well, and then we saw new surges, new waves. So we cannot exclude that. And by the way, we still know that there are new variants developing. So I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not an expert from a medical point of view, but in contact with them, I received some of these, let's say, doubts and concerns. So in terms of Europe, I know that's very common now to criticize Europe, but let me tell you one thing from my experience with the European Union, where I was participating more than 22 years and 10 leading the European Commission. It was probably slow than some other because it's around 27 countries, it's not one country. But the decision was to do that together. So the European Commission has done it on behalf of all the member states because they asked the Commission because typically the European Union has no competence in matters of public health. So what I'd like people and viewers to think, what would be the alternative? If it was a competition between Germany and France and the Netherlands and Italy and Spain, I mean, I think it would have been much more disruptive, not only for Europe, but for the rest of the world. So it's going on a slowish path, but I think it's going on the right direction, but with those unknowns I've mentioned before about possible variants, about possible waves.
Do you think it's possible we could see another lockdown in Europe?
We are seeing some countries now recently announcing not complete lockdowns, but a reinforcement of the confinement rules. Others are relaxing. Others are, in fact, reinforcing this confinement. And I think it's going to go like that for some time. Certainly, we are not going to do it as quickly as in other parts of the world.
As chairman of Abu Dhabi Ports, Your Excellency, I want to bring you in on this in the sense that you know very, very well how important the logistics side of vaccination rollouts can be. Obviously, Professor Barroso mentioning there, we're talking about many, many countries within the European Union. You think about this a bit more globally. How essential do you see Abu Dhabi's role in creating an opportunity for vaccines to get to those who need them most?
Thank you for having me, Hadley. And I think based on our past experience, the past year and a half that we dealt with the pandemic, as my colleague Sheikh Abdullah mentioned, that we built all the capacity to manage the pandemic in an excellent manner. We built our capacity on a storage facility, on moving the vaccine doses around the Emirates. We're also wrapping up our capacity to get up to the 120 million storage facility for our HOPE initiative. We are promising the whole world that we can and we will provide an 18 billion vaccine doses for the nations that require support from our side. The infrastructure that we built, the experience that we built in the past year and a half, proven that we can add to the humanity around the world. To our partners working with the humanitarian efforts around the world, we are ready to mobilize, and we are sitting in a very unique position in a gateway between the East and West to deliver our services based on the world-class expectations.
Dr. Hatchett, weigh in on this one, because obviously you've worked in various U.S. administrations. You understand the workings of Washington, for example. When you think about this a bit more broadly, obviously the UAE has been a world leader in working towards vaccinating everyone. The U.S. has really not been out there in front as perhaps they would have done under previous administrations. We've seen moves from the Biden team, at least so far. In your view, do you see the U.S. taking a stronger role in this next year?
Sure. No, thank you, Hadley, for the question, and thanks to you and CNBC and the HOPE Consortium for including me in the summit. We have seen a change in Washington. I think the previous administration does need to be given credit for the incredible investment in the development of the vaccines through Operation Warp Speed. I think the entire world will ultimately benefit from the acceleration of vaccine development. The Biden administration has made very clear that they are internationalist in their orientation and that they do want to balance their commitment to delivering vaccine to the American people, which has to take first priority, I think, obviously, with their ability to join the rest of the world in the effort to end the pandemic as quickly as possible. They've already made commitments of up to $4 billion in support of the COVAX initiative. That's the global initiative that we and Professor Barroso are leading with WHO to deliver vaccines globally. And we're anticipating additional support from the United States as they begin to take care of their domestic needs.
We've obviously seen that major $1 trillion stimulus package already that President Biden has moved forward on. I want to ask His Excellency Abdullah Mohamed about this one, though, as well. I mean, when you think about this with regards to all of the progress that you've been able to make here in the UAE specifically, I had the chance literally just a year ago to speak with the head of the WHO in Riyadh. And at that point, they had yet to actually call this a global pandemic. Do you think it would have been easier for countries if this had been called a name like pandemic earlier on, or would we have still seen this kind of global response?
Well, I think with this pandemic, we've seen a lot of mistakes from early stages, and we've seen a lot of hesitance in taking decisions whether this is a pandemic or no. And this is what actually has triggered this mass global pandemic that had spread all around the whole world. If we had taken this very early stages and taken it seriously, I think we have had worked better than what we have done now. And politics had played a bigger role also in diverting our focus. Instead of focusing on the health issues, it was a lot of focusing into politics and other areas that are not necessary at that point.
There was a lot of fear, wasn't there,
Yes.
about calling a pandemic a pandemic?
Definitely. And that's what we have been, even talking to our peers around the world that, what's coming up next is trying to approve these vaccines around the world. And this is becoming more politics than health segment that we need to really focus on, because a lot of countries are disregarding other countries' production of vaccines, and other countries are approving their own vaccines only. And we're saying this is not the right thing to do at this moment, where even if we would have European or Asian or whatever vaccine produced all together, it will not be enough for the whole world for the next 6 to 7 years. So it's very important for us to focus on the health issue and leave these politics a bit aside of what we're doing at this moment.
If I can add, sorry to interrupt. Also, we all understand that pandemic is a direct effect on the health of the people. At the same time, our wise leadership in the UAE acknowledged this pandemic from an early stage. And what we did, we guaranteed all the necessity of our people, from food, from pharmaceutical requirements, from all services that are the basics for people to live their normal life. From day one, there was an assurance from our government to make sure that our people life does not change based on that pandemic. And we will deal with all the pandemic issue from the health perspective. But at the same time, life goes on.
It does indeed. And Professor Barrasso, weigh in on this one, because obviously you were mentioning just a few moments ago, talking about the European Union, talking, I believe, about the idea that had you had all of these competing nations, you would have had more of a vaccine nationalism than we've seen in Europe. How concerned are you that we're not moving fast enough to combat that today?
First of all, let me just add like this, just be precise. I'm not here representing the European Union.
True.
I was many years leading the European Union, but now I'm chairman of Gavi, and it's the Global Alliance, Vaccine Alliance, and so my perspective is truly global. And what I believe is important, as it was said by their excellencies, the representatives of the government of Abu Dhabi, is in fact to have a truly global perspective. Now it became a slogan, but it's not. It should not be seen as a slogan. No one is safe until everyone is safe, because if we are not able to control this acute phase of the pandemic, new variants of the virus will go on, so reinfections may happen, new surges may happen. So it's one of those cases where we cannot say globally, your side of the boat is sinking. We may sink together. So, of course, I understand that different governments before, their first priority to protect their own people. But at the same time, it is important to keep this global perspective. From that point of view, of course, we at Gavi and COVAX, where I'm working with Dr. Richard Atchett, SAPI, but also the World Health Organization and UNICEF and others, we try to mobilize the global resources, namely for the poorest of the world, so that it will not happen like in last pandemics, where in fact they waited until the end of the line. Now, it's not perfect, but in fact we have been accelerating this delivery to some of the poorer countries of the world. And from that point of view, I think some lessons have been learned compared with previous pandemics, but quite frankly, I think we have to learn also many lessons with this pandemic, because not always the behavior has been optimal from the different players involved.
And from your perspective, speaking from with your Gavi hat on at this point, just to be clear, when you think about the logistics involved in all of this, is Abu Dhabi best placed, in your view, to help with the COVAX initiative?
Abu Dhabi has been a great leader, and in fact, I want to use this opportunity to congratulate the representatives of the government of Abu Dhabi and the United Arab Emirates, because, I mean, Abu Dhabi not only has seen the problems from the beginning, great leadership, but also because of its unique position from a logistic point of view between Africa, Asia, and in the Middle East, it can be, and it has been, a very important logistic hub. So let me congratulate the authorities of Abu Dhabi for that, and also the commitment to this global good is indeed very laudable as an attitude to this, let's say, global perspective that we need for global health, seeing global health as a global public good and not as a matter for nationalism or, let's say, competition. As I've been saying, vaccine rollout should not be a beauty contest. We should cooperate to make it effective for most people in this world.
If I could just jump in on just to follow up on Professor Barroso's comment, I mean, Abu Dhabi is literally in the center of the world, and probably understands as well as any other community how interconnected the world is, and I think the speed and the rapidity of the response in the UAE in response to the unfolding pandemic reflects their awareness of the vulnerability that the entire world has, and so absolutely want to congratulate them on a really effective response so far. I think the world will, as we go forward, learn lessons from a number of countries. South Korea is another example, Singapore, even Australia, New Zealand, China, that have managed to negotiate successfully through the pandemic. The countries that were willing to jump in and secure vaccine early and to take risks even before we knew which vaccines would be successful are now, among the leaders in terms of rolling the vaccines out to their populations. And essentially, if we can end the acute phase of the pandemic, as Professor Barroso said, by protecting the most vulnerable, the virus will continue to circulate until we vaccinate almost everyone, but we can take the economic sting and the cost of human lives out of the pandemic, and we hope to be able to do that by the end of this year.
As you say, Dr. Hatchett, I want to follow up there in terms of the logistics of all of this with His Excellency Al-Hababi. When you think about this with regards to the lessons that you've learned just in the last 9 months, frankly, of working with not just the government, various sectors of your government, but also working with global governments and the private sector as well, what do you see as the biggest challenges to what you're trying to achieve?
The most important is the communication and the speed of the delivery of the services. And based on the past experience, we learned that you have to work closely with your partners to deliver on the government expectation and the people needs as well. Therefore, from day one, the government gave us the green light to work with our partners locally and internationally. Locally, to build, to ramp up our infrastructure, to build the capacity that we need to serve our people. At the same time, work with our international partners to make sure that we give the service that we're looking for our people, for our country, to go through this pandemic. And let me add one more thing, since we're talking about Abu Dhabi and how Abu Dhabi managed this situation, and we need to look at the future. We learned so many lessons from this experience, and we are going ahead in the future to be a live science hub in the region and internationally. Our target for the future is to make Abu Dhabi a pharmaceutical center for the world, and therefore we're building our capacity, we're building our infrastructure and all our processes to achieve that target.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. We've just recently seen Mubadala, obviously the investment arm of the Abu Dhabi government, making significant commitments to investing in the UK and a bit more broadly, as you say, in those sort of life health kind of sectors. Mr. Chairman, when you think about this with regards to the Department of Health, what kind of partnerships are you looking for as you look to tackle not just the COVID-19 pandemic, but future pandemics as well?
Just before I start into answering your question, I just want to make sure that working together is the way through this whole thing. Closing up countries showed no effect to contain this COVID. And we have seen a lot of countries in the early stages that they've closed totally, and they had not even one single person that is infected. And on a later stage, we've seen the spread in their country going viral, and it's not, they couldn't even stop that spread of viruses. Working together, talking one language, working as a one team to overcome, it's not a hard thing to do. But because of lack of focus, that's what led to what we are in today in wave 2, wave 3, and it's still going on.
So lockdowns aren't the answer in your view?
Lockdowns is one segment of containing the virus. But it's not going to contain the virus if you're not working with other countries that are around you and that are surrounding you. Our leadership was wise enough when this happened. We have not had the lockdown from the early days, and we still had to, we still been able to manage that curve to be, as flat as possible, all the way through. But the message from our leadership is to work actually with the other countries, help them out. Because us helping them, they are helping us indirectly, and this would make us overcome this situation and stop this spread of this virus. That's why the Hope Consortium is there. That's why we have worked throughout the world with investing in the healthcare and with putting a lot of effort into deploying some of the science behind all of this. So I think answering your question, yes, we've been working very hard, and we've been working with partners throughout around the world, to find solutions for this. It's not only for UAE. Abu Dhabi is well known for their humanitarian aid throughout the world, whether in Africa, Europe, anywhere around the world. But still, it's a solution for all of us. And Abu Dhabi is deploying whatever resources that is there for it to be helping the world overcome this virus.
Dr. Hatchett, come in on this one in the sense that what are the questions that we aren't asking in your view? Because obviously there's a lot of talk about the mutations of this COVID-19 pandemic in terms of what that could mean for potential future lockdowns and the vaccines to tackle them.
Well, you started by talking about the impact of the stimulus and the hope that that would revive the global economy. And of course, that's critically important. But the stimulus by itself doesn't attack the root cause of the pandemic, which is the virus. And the best tool that we have, other than lockdowns, which nobody wants to perpetuate any longer than we have to stop the spread of the virus, is the vaccine. And so the real question is, what can we do to maximize the production of the vaccines? Where we are right now, we're actually in, the world has never done anything like this before. We're 15 months into our experience with the virus. 400 million people have already been vaccinated. That's extraordinary. We have 9 vaccines globally that are ramping up production, but vaccine is still very scarce. That's maybe 5% of the global population, and we need to get that number up probably somewhere close to 60%. The question is, how can we do that as rapidly as possible? One of the important things that we can do is make sure that our vaccine manufacturers have all of the critical raw materials, the inputs, the critical consumables, the equipment that they need to scale up their vaccine production. That's potentially another important role that a logistics hub like Abu Dhabi can help support. It's critically important that countries, we understand countries have needs to vaccinate their own populations, but if we see any kind of escalation, reduction in the free flow of goods and services, particularly these critical materials that are required to make the vaccines, that could actually slow vaccine manufacturing down. That's been a big cause of concern for us in recent weeks and months. And we've seen just last week, Pfizer announced in the US that other medical products, a limited number of other medical products supplies were going to be reduced because of the vaccination effort. And we don't want the need to ramp up our vaccine capacity as quickly as we can to spill over and to produce these side effects.
Dr. Hatchett, when you see the headlines that we've had over the last couple of weeks about AstraZeneca, for example, are you concerned from a medical perspective that some of these vaccinations, or these vaccines, I should say, are not going to have the efficacy needed over the long term?
It's really difficult to discriminate between the efficacy of the different vaccines. And I mean, I don't want to get too down into the medical details, but the studies that were done did use different endpoints and different definitions. What we have seen with all of the major vaccines is the large studies have shown that they are safe, have shown that they are effective and can prevent disease, and particularly prevent severe disease. So what we really need to do now is take the vaccines that we have. We hopefully will be adding more vaccines to that list and get those vaccines distributed as quickly as possible. Some of the challenges with AstraZeneca, you know, the concerns about safety in the European Union, that shouldn't distress people. That should actually give people confidence. Those are systems for monitoring the vaccines when they're administered to millions of people that are picking up rare side effects, identifying them, and letting them be evaluated as rapidly as possible.
Professor Barrasso, when you think about this with regards to something you mentioned earlier in terms of getting these vaccines to the people who need them the most, low and middle income, wherever they happen to be around the world, how far do you think we need to go yet to get that?
As it was just mentioned by Dr. Richard Hatchett, we have already in the world around 400 million doses administered. So in fact, my latest figures are 405. But we are facing a pandemic that has already killed 2.7 million people around the world. And there are at least 123 million documented cases to the World Health Organization. So we are yet far from the solution. So what I believe is now critical is precisely deployment of rollout of vaccines. This is the critical point now. Without it, we will not be able to control the acute phase of this pandemic. And therefore that we need, now speaking on behalf of COVAX, the COVAX facility, it was created with Gavi, with CEPI, that Richard Hatchett represents, but also with World Health Organization and others. The idea is precisely to help namely the 92 countries that are countries that need our support. They are the so-called AMC, Advanced Market Commitment. And there we still need some more support. There will be an investment, let's say, pledging conference in June. We expect now to deliver 1.8 billion doses until the end of this year. That's our target. But we still need some money, to put it bluntly. Namely, we have already been receiving $6.3 billion. I'm speaking always in dollars, thanks to the last, let's say, commitments made by the United States, but also the European Union, including some individual countries separately from the European Union budget, like Germany. So we are already 6.3. So at least we have a gap to fill of 2 billion, hopefully by June. And then we have to prepare for 2022. That will, because it's quite clear that we still have to deal with this pandemic through 2022. So a lot of efforts, but in fact, all these investments are small, even if they appear very big, compared with the cost of the pandemic. According to the IMF and others, this pandemic is costing $1.2 trillion by year. So the best economic policy today is vaccine policy, and to succeed in the rollout of vaccines. And as it was mentioned by Dr. Richard Hatchett, there are also problems of production in some of our suppliers and in some countries, and we have to face them. And so everything we can do to support a bigger, let's say, production and a speedier rollout of vaccines will certainly be a great contribution to control this more acute phase of the pandemic.
I want to bring in the chairman of the Department of Health here. Your Excellency, when you think about what the professor was just saying about a pledging conference, in your view, how much do you believe that the world should be contributing to this at this point? Because I understand, of course, from the CNBC financial perspective, a lot of these countries obviously look very much looking after their own when it comes to the economics of this.
Well, it's hard to predict how much the world would need, but as His Excellency the Professor has just mentioned, that what we've been talking about is a fraction of the number that actually is costing the whole world over trillions of dollars per year. And I think how much would this, in relative, be as of importance to any country to deploy vaccines and work on their population? Definitely, the whole world need help. Definitely, there are countries that are there that will need support from other countries, and I think we will have to move, as a one unit. The whole world has to move to help the other countries. Otherwise, even having the vaccine is not going to stop the spread. As we know, the vaccine is just working partially to save people from ICU rooms, not from the virus itself. So it's not the final product, which is the vaccine, but we have to look into so many other things that are also in relation to this pandemic.
And in terms of the port aspect of this, obviously it's logistics, it's technology. Your Excellency Al-Hababi, I'm torn on this one because I've spoken to so many different CEOs about what they're trying to do. For example, the CEO of FedEx, among others, to use technology to unlock an easier path, if you will, to distributing these vaccines. What do you, in your view, need at this point to make this process easier?
It's crucial to work with our partners, as you mentioned, Aramex, as well as Etihad Airline, and the G42 technology provider, as well as the Gateway solution, which is a platform to organize the whole processes in a smart way. We're sitting in a very unique situation. We are considered as a one-stop shop from the manufacturer all the way to the nation that needs the vaccine. So we'll be handling the whole value chain A to Z to deliver the doses in a safe environment as well as secure environment. And based on what we built in the past from a cold storage facility and ultra facility, it gives us a very unique situation to be a safe place for vaccines for whoever needs it around the world.
If I may add, may I just underline, because this issue about logistics is really very important. Sometimes people have not the real perspective about what's going on. We are making history. This is the single largest and most rapid delivery of vaccines in history. We never had such a comprehensive effort. So it's really a huge task, a huge undertaking. So a point I'd like to underline is, besides, of course, what governments and international organizations can do, it's also what the private sector can do, and in fact should be doing. We have already seen a lot of generosity. Speaking now from Gavi, we know we are a public-private partnership. We were founded by the Bill Gates Foundation together with UNICEF, World Health Organization, World Bank, and we have governments from donor countries, but governments also from the so-called implementing countries, and we have civil society organizations. So our core concept, and I think we have to apply it to the response to this pandemic, is a public-private partnership, because this is the biggest ever effort of delivery of vaccines so quickly. So that requires efforts that sometimes are not only financially, are also in terms of leadership, of commitment, are also in terms of regulatory capacity, and sometimes in terms of logistic, administrative capacity, management capacity. Because I've been following, from my position at Gavi, I've been following, for instance, the rollout of vaccines to African countries. How delighted they were when the first planes arrived in their countries. Now, it's far from perfect, but in fact, we were, in past pandemics, it took much more time. If you count the time it took in this pandemic, the first rollout of vaccines, let's say in the United Kingdom, and the first in India, a low-income country, was 63 days. And outside of India, because India, as you know, is one of the biggest, if not the biggest producer of vaccines, outside of India, through COVAX, it took 83 days for the first, compared with UK, for the first vaccines to come to Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire in Africa. These were the first in Africa outside, also low-income countries. But still, they are behind. Still, we have to be honest about this. We have a real problem of inequality. And one of the solutions we have to think, besides the private sector, is those sharing by the rich countries. Because the rich countries, they in fact have accumulated huge surpluses of vaccines. Most likely, they will not need them. And so we are already working with them to see if we can do it in a relatively coordinated manner, those sharing mechanism for those who have 4-5 times more vaccines than what they need, that they will be able to share with those who don't have the same capacity to acquire those vaccines.
Weigh in on this one, Dr. Hatchett, because one of the things that you've said as CEO of CEPI, with that hat on in that sense, that we must remain firmly focused on delivering equitable access if we're to stop the endless cycle of lockdowns and illness.
No, I believe that firmly. And I think the challenge, we cannot underestimate the challenge of what we're undertaking. I mean, Professor Barroso said this was the largest distribution of vaccines in history. Absolutely true. It is probably also one of the most complicated logistical undertakings ever. If you think about it, we have already the 9 vaccines that are being distributed. That number is going to increase. Those vaccines have different cold chain requirements. They have different distribution schedules in terms of the intervals between doses. And we're literally trying to reach billions of people. I mean, we would love to see 4, 5, 6 billion people vaccinated, in the next 9 months. The challenge obviously is that countries are differently situated in terms of their preparedness. Countries, the high-income countries often have good systems for the distribution of vaccines. Low-income countries have very good systems for the distribution of vaccines, but those are principally for the distribution of pediatric vaccines. And children, fortunately, have not been severely affected by this pandemic. So those countries are going to have to retool those systems to deliver vaccines to older individuals, to the elderly, to people who may not be used to interacting even with the weak health systems that many of these countries have. So in lifting up those countries to be able to execute this complicated logistical undertaking, they're also going to have to develop new capacities and new capabilities. And if we don't tackle this in a collective fashion globally, the likelihood of succeeding at that is very limited.
Can I add something to that too? I think it's not only the pandemic that we're facing today is a challenge to us. It's also the other sicknesses that are neglected and that might come chronics in the near future. And I think that's the second wave of other sicknesses that we might see rise within our countries, because the lockdowns and all of the secondary hospitals that are not able to see their patients or follow up on their sicknesses, these are going to become a challenge for us in the near future, whereby we will see a lot of cancer patients, a lot of other chronics that might be also as a challenge to countries. So it's a chain of things that if we didn't take measures immediately and fast enough, as His Excellency the Professor just mentioned, it will become a challenge in other areas also that might throw its toll on countries.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, because at the end of the day, and Professor Barroso and Dr. Hatchett as well, please feel free to weigh in. I mean, we're talking about the need for donor nations to do more. We're talking about the private sector, they have to do more as well. But in your sense, what does the individual need to contribute to this effort at this point? Because we've seen so much back and forth, particularly in the media, about what's necessary to combat this illness, and also in terms of stamping out that kind of vaccine nationalism.
If I don't know, Richard, you want to start?
I'll jump in. I'll say the first thing that an individual can do if they have the opportunity is to roll up their sleeve and be vaccinated. I mean, it is something that every individual can do to fight the pandemic is to seek vaccination, and whatever vaccine is available, is the vaccine that I would want personally. I do think it's also important for individuals to understand that, you know, part of the reason that we're doing this is to end the pandemic and to reduce transmission so that we don't have additional variants emerge that can undo all of the progress of the last year. And so while the individuals are waiting for vaccine, I think, one, they need to support their government's efforts, and two, they need to follow public health recommendations. And that, unfortunately, right now does mean in many places restrictions on activity. But it's only by fighting this together that we will beat this virus.
Professor Barata, you want to weigh in?
I fully agree. I have almost nothing to add. I believe that besides vaccines, those, let's say, very basic rules of washing your hands, keeping high levels of hygiene, trying to keep some social distancing, and also, of course, observing the rules in the different countries. This is very important. It's one argument I've been hearing coming from some sectors is, oh, I'm free to do whatever I want. It's my health. This is not true. It's not only your health, it's health of others. So it's one of those cases where we have to see our rights, but also the rights of others. There is an issue of responsibility and solidarity here, the ethics of responsibility in interpersonal relations, but also, I would say, the ethics of responsibility in global relations between countries, between international organizations, between the public sector and the private sector. And that's why, if I want to be a little bit more optimistic, because not to give just a negative picture, maybe we could use this pandemic to teach us lessons also for solving other global problems. And hopefully, in the future, we'll draw the lessons from this pandemic, and we'll be able also to make governments around the world understand that they may have different political regimes. I'm not naive. I know that we are going to have, let's say, ideological and political, let's say, difficulties. But at the same time, when it comes to global public goods, like global health, they should cooperate. This is the ethics of responsibility and solidarity among people, individuals, but also among in the global community at large.
If I can add one small comment here, we need to focus on doing our job the best way we can do it. And we cannot do it alone. We need the help and the support of everyone, the public and the government sector, as well as the private sector. So having the public roll up their sleeves is very important to make us do our job the best way we can do to save and protect lives.
Do you think that there is an opportunity there? And this question is for His Excellency Abdullah Al-Hamid. For the UAE, I mean, leading by example, obviously, in terms of not just the rollout of the vaccination program, but also from a government to citizen perspective, in terms of, from day one wearing the masks and being very conscious about, we're all responsible. I remember that campaign has been pretty well played out for this country. When you think about this with regards to making that a more global effort, what, in your view, needs to be done?
Well, a lot of countries or governments had used this politically. So they've lost their people and they've lost their trust. And getting back that trust is hard. In UAE, we all follow the system that's there and that's led by a great leadership here that has always been trusted by the people. For them to listen to what the government is saying, we've seen it evident in Abu Dhabi and in the whole UAE. People, we've seen them very, aligned with whatever comes out as, necessary directions for them to follow, for us to be able to overcome this pandemic. I think there are a lot of lessons that we could take out of this, and we are more than happy, to share this with the whole world. From making this as a one language, unified language across the whole departments of Abu Dhabi and the United Arab Emirates, to how to message people and talk to people, and how to get them to be aligned with what you do. People not knowing what's happening are always tend to stay away from doing what you want them to do. But when they know what's happening and they could hear from their governments and could hear the real things that are happening and how well it's being managed and how good they're doing, they will always follow because they always want to have a better place for them to be. And I think that's what's been happening in UAE, and that's what we've been doing in UAE by having people understanding the whole situation and understanding point by point and what each thing they do different would affect their lives on a daily manner. So I think having that very well, seen by the people, you will have the people do the right thing. And this is a natural thing that people would want to do something better, but they will do it only when they see things visual to them that they could relate to and they could have that to be done on their daily lives.
And just as a follow-on to that one, in the sense that we saw a lot of negative press on Dubai, for example, at the early stages of this year, 2021, as a result of folks in the UK and the rest of Europe essentially blaming the Emirates for an uptick in cases. Yet the Dubai government immediately put in place measures to readjust, percentages in restaurants and those in hotels and elsewhere. And now we see that the number of new cases well under 2,000 a day here in the UAE. How big a part of what we're seeing, at least playing out here in the UAE, do you think will encourage eventually the kickstart for global travel? Are we going to see people coming back here in larger numbers, do you think, by summer and the end of this year?
Look, we go here by numbers and we go here by facts. Whatever fact we see, we take action, and that's where the government's role is to take these decisions. We do, deliver to them all of these data, and we show them all of the facts that are in UAE, and that's their decision on taking how far should we open up or close down. And that's what we've been doing in the last year and so in Abu Dhabi and in the UAE, by going by facts, by numbers, death toll, our capacity in hospitals, how much do we need to close. All of these things have been dealt with by having these numbers visualized by the government. We have over 30 live dashboards that the government is seeing on a daily basis, that they take decisions based on these dashboards. And I think, yes, we will see these people coming back to United Arab Emirates, having their normal lives once we have these numbers go down to a safe number that we could open up even more. So we are closing.
What do you see as that safe number at this point?
Well, that's what I've been saying previously, that the safety of other countries around you is actually going to reflect on what you have within your country. A lot of media talked about people coming into Dubai infected, coming from Dubai to their countries infected, whereby their countries are in closure. Well, it's like the thing is not, matching. It's like their countries are closed. They have big numbers of death and infection. Our numbers are way, way, way much lower, and it is considered one of the lowest in the world. But it's always, we don't want to go by the media saying things without facts. The fact here is that, the numbers are low. These are the facts, and we are still taking these measures even harsher than it should be, because we really want to make sure that everyone is safe, whether he's coming from outside UAE or people who are living in the UAE.
Before I let the panelists go on this one, we've got a few more minutes to go, and I just wanted to do a round robin quickly. If you would just give me your take on where we are today and how much further we're going to have to go until the world is safe. I want to start with Dr. Hatchett.
Well, we vaccinated about 5% of the world's population, so we've got a long way to go. But the trends are in the right direction. I think that the news for many countries over the coming year will be improving as vaccination rates climb, and I hope, and Professor Barroso and I are working hard and look forward to working with colleagues from the Emirates and elsewhere to see those benefits extended globally.
I want to bring in now Professor Barroso.
Yeah, of course, I agree fully with Dr. Hatchett. And I believe that to reach, let's say, if we would like to reach at least 60% of global population, we need to do more. Not only help solve some issues of production, but also raising more financing. One idea that we have not yet discussed today here is from the private sector. I think today, being in touch with many global investors, not only institutional investors like sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, but also big corporates, I think it's possible to think about new ideas for investment, for instance, in financial markets. For instance, vaccine bonds. Now there is a great appetite in the market for ESG, environment, social, and governance responsible methods. And so until now, we have seen great generosity from the traditional donors, including the governments. We are still going to ask them for some more effort, but maybe we should now also engage more the private sector, because without this further commitment, we will not be able to reach the 60% of the global population. We are on the right trend, as it was just now mentioned by my colleague from CEPI, but still we need a bigger effort ahead. That is the goal.
I want to bring in His Excellency Fallah Al-Hawabi.
Again, we are fully committed at Abu Dhabi Port Company to deliver 18 billion doses around the world. We are committed to work with our partners around the world to help us get the doses, and we were working with the humanitarian organization around the world for the countries that cannot afford to have the vaccines. So we're hopeful for the infrastructure that the government supported us in building, and we're looking forward to work with the nations that require the vaccines.
And Your Excellency, just to end the session with yourself.
Thank you. I think, as Richard had mentioned, we have reached 5% of the world population that had been vaccinated. The remaining is 95%, and it is our responsibility. I think we should all work together to remove all of these obstacles that are slowing us down and see what are the challenges. And I think all working together, we could overcome these challenges, and we could work faster, more efficient, with a focused direction that we could actually overcome this situation. So I think this is our goal, and this is what we're looking for in Abu Dhabi and UAE, to find these possibilities with our partners around the world, to work and start on the remaining 95% to be able to vaccinate them and overcome the situation. Thank you very much.
I just want to thank all of you, Your Excellencies, as well as Dr. Hatchett and Professor Barrasso. Thank you so much for joining us for this first opening panel of the HOPE Consortium. Thank you, guys, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To watch all the sessions from the World Immunization and Logistics Summit, click the link